Hi, welcome to Entertainment Insider. I'm Gene Triplett, entertainment editor for the Oklahoman and NewsOK.com. I'm here today with George Lang, Matt Price, and Heather Warlick-Moore, and we're going to talk about some of the top entertainment stories this week. And we're going to start off with the latest in the Fast and Furious series, which just opened this past weekend, with essentially, pretty much the same cast as the first one. It's out in theaters now, and Christy Lemire of the Associated Press summed it up in her review this way. Noise, noise, noise. Crunch metal and shattered glass. More noise. Revving engines. Vin Diesel's giant head. Hot chicks and tight miniskirts. Even more noise. The end. That's pretty much all there is to Fast and Furious. She gave it 1.5 stars. And yet it cleared an astonishing $72.5 million in its opening weekend. Now, how do you account for that?
You know, whenever we're faced with, when society is faced with this kind of tragedy, you know, we always say, what could I have done to prevent this catastrophe, you know? But there's nothing that can be done. This is one of those things that it's standard issue for the spring. You know, there's a spring doldrums period where, you know, where something that's really, really down market, the kind of thing that, you know, that shouldn't be made becomes a huge hit. This happened a couple of years ago with Wild Hogs. You know, I don't know anybody who saw Wild Hogs, but a lot of people did. A lot of people did, and so the critics, we sit around and go, what could have possibly made this happen? And yet there's no control over it. It's just one of those things, and you know, and it's going to keep happening. I mean, next year there will be something even worse than Fast and Furious that is going to make $80 million. We're heading toward, you know, the world that Mike Judge predicted in Idiocracy. You know, those kind of movies that, you know, where it's like, ow my, you know, whatever.
Matt, what do you think?
Obviously people like these two guys together because Paul Walker and Vin Diesel return for this movie, and it's the first one to really make significant money since the first. So despite the fact that it may not make sense to any of us, people obviously like these two guys in a movie together. And another thing, what George said, sometimes what catches fire in the spring is something that we can actually kind of get behind, like 300 a few years ago. Sometimes what catches fire in the spring, you're just scratching your head and thinking, what were people doing there exactly? So,
yeah, we're in between the right periods for film. I mean, you know, we're waiting for May at this point, and so is everybody else, and so they've got to have something to do, and so they go to this.
And something clicks, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not. I think one thing that you see is just people like action movies. People like they like big sound and big adventure and things that you can't get in your home theater experience as much as in the movies. Right. And I think maybe big sound and explosions. Obviously, kicking and explosions aren't the only thing that people should go to the movie for, but it is something that the people enjoy.
Some people, if they can't blow stuff up real good in their own home, they want to watch it in the theater.
Heather, what's your take on this?
Well, I agree. I think it's got a lot to do with timing, like George was talking about. I think, you know, dudes and fast cars and hot chicks. I mean, it's a perfect combination that sells. And then to top it off, you've got Vin Diesel, who actually appeals to the other gender. So that's a good combination. But, I don't know. I think it's kind of funny. Like, I was looking online and I was reading about back in 1895, the arrival of a train at a station was like the first action film. It was 50 seconds, and it was this guy just shot the arrival of a train at a station. And it like totally caught fire and, swept the world. So people love their vehicles, they love fast cars, and I mean, whatever, it doesn't really speak to me. But did anybody see Saturday Night Live?
No.
Hilarious skit spoofing the movie. It was with Seth Rogen and Adam Sandberg, and it was the Fast and the Bi-Curious. It was, and it was like they were doing this Brokeback Mountain thing, and they're like, it's just like the original, only slightly gayer. It was so funny. So I don't think that had anything to do with it, but you got to check it out online. It's pretty funny.
I gave up trying to understand the taste of the majority of the American movie-going public a long time ago. Maybe it's just too much bad TV. It's kind of lowered our standards. An early edit of X-Men Origins Wolverine, Fox's big summer tentpole release, leaked on the internet last week. How can studios lock down their property while still making it possible for editors and special effects companies to get to it during post-production. Is there an answer?
I've got it. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Just what occurs to me is just, maybe put it online on a secure website, give each person their own, password or whatever. And if your password leaks, you're held accountable, and maybe they can track that kind of thing that way. And, the property on the website is, you can't copy it, that kind of thing. So just a simple, possible answer. Who knows?
I've always gotten the impression, just from talking to people in the industry, that this is, for an industry that is so beholden to technology, the studios themselves aren't really well versed in it. I mean, the studio heads, the major movers and shakers at the studios, they don't really even use email. They dictate memos. It's like it's like it's the 1940s or something. It doesn't surprise me that much that somebody could, even if it wasn't just like passing a DVD to somebody, a watermarked DVD, which is apparently what did happen. That it was a watermark or a watermarked copy of this ended up leaking, and they've traced the watermark to an Australian special effects company. But my guess is that it probably wasn't that diabolical. I think somebody outside the studio probably found an inroad, technologically speaking, into a computer and pilfered it. And the fact is that if I were working at a studio, I'd make sure that my firewalls had firewalls, because that is a ton of money that can be lost. Just and those copies are out there now. People have downloaded them, and it might not be the final version, but it might be good enough for a lot of people.
Yeah, as far as what they can do technologically, I'm not an expert to say what they can do. Obviously, they should do maybe a little bit more at this point, given the amount of money that gets put into this thing. What you might see, as a possible consequence of this, if Wolverine doesn't open like they expected it to open, you may see less incentive for these people to invest $100 million in these big effects-heavy movies when that just gives it that many more opportunities to leak.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially when you look at, while we enjoyed Watchmen, that's one that we saw and it did well. It maybe didn't perform to studio expectations. That was very effects heavy. Now you've got Wolverine, which is going to be another action effects heavy movie, not doing so well. Meanwhile, you've got Fast and the Furious, which is, it probably is done a different way. It's sort of a different type of movie than a Watchmen or a Wolverine. It's doing very well. You may see a shift in studio taste and what they want to option and develop based on something completely outside the realm of what they had control over. So if you're thinking about going and downloading a movie illegally or leaking one or whatever, that may be something you could be affecting the fate of what you see in the future.
That's true.
Yeah, well, a lot of the sneak previews that they have anymore. They've got the security guys in gray suits all over the place. It's like the FBI, and they've got these wands and everything.
We got to turn in our cell phones a lot of times.
I don't know what the answer is. They seem to have, adopted a CIA level security, at least at the screenings. I'm not sure what the answer is, but
they got to get it before the screening.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
In an interview with Extra last week, Stevie Nicks, who was dubbed the reigning queen of rock and roll back in the 80s, was asked how her journey differed from Britney Spears' rise to fame. And Nicks said it's different in that Britney didn't join a band when she was 18 and play every day for 5 hours Monday through Thursday and then play gigs all weekend. You have to pay your dues to be a real rock star. How do you think today's female rock and pop stars measure up to the women of past rock generations? And I'm going to ask Heather because
I'm a rock star.
You're a rock star.
You're a rock star.
Well, I don't know. I think that was an interesting question because, the road to pop stardom these days has just changed so dramatically because of, TV and internet and all the different outlets for media. And, whereas today's pop stars are package deals from Disney and, they are promoted through TV shows. You watch Brothers and Sisters or whatever, and you hear a song and you see the name of the artist and the song down in the corner of your TV, and it's all, it's just so much marketing. I know it was marketing back in the day when Stevie was at it, but it was just a whole different thing. Back then it was like, Solid Gold and some of those dance shows, even
Right, Dance Fever.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
They would have people
Yeah.
on there. But I mean, I agree with Stevie Nicks to a certain extent. I mean, you do need to pay your dues to be a really hardcore rock star. But I think, they actually probably have a lot more in common than she's willing to admit, because Britney started when she was pretty young, and she's had to work, even though it's been a different path to a similar end goal. It's still been, she still has had to work at it and pay her dues in a totally different way. So.
Well, okay, I don't think that much has changed. I mean, there's the technology, and I think the one thing that is different now is that pop stars don't necessarily have to know how to sing. To there's auto-tune and things like that can make it possible for a singer to kind of get on the job training, have a hit, and then go get some vocal lessons. And that's been the case with Britney Spears. Britney never really nobody ever said that she had a great voice, but she had a great marketing campaign. Yeah. And now, but if you go back to like the 1970s, around the time that Stevie Nicks was in like 1975, when the first Fleetwood Mac album with Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham came out, you also had hits like Andrea True Connections, More. Andrea True was a porn star, okay? and somebody decided that, what you ought to do? You ought to have a disco song. And so she recorded a disco song, and it went to #1. So I don't think that much has changed, and there are great female rock stars out there right now. I mean, I think that just tomorrow, Natasha Khan, the lead singer of this British group called Bat for Lashes, they're going. That album comes out, Two Sons, on Tuesday, and it's getting some of the best advance word of any album this year. So I think that maybe one of the great critic favorites of 2009 is going to be by a female rock star.
Right.
So we'll see.
Matt?
Like George said, I don't maybe think as much has changed as what Stevie Nicks thinks. Now, admittedly, yes, today's pop stars don't really have to play an instrument or even necessarily know how to sing, but I wouldn't say they aren't working. I mean, if you want to join a band at 18 at this point, it would almost be too late. I mean, when did Britney and Miley Cyrus and all these people started way earlier than that? And you look at somebody like Miley Cyrus's career path, she's been working on a television show since she was very young, and nobody really says working on a series TV show is easy. That's long days and hard work. So it's a different thing. You're not playing your guitar and playing in gigs in a smoky club or whatever. But it's just a different path, and things are done a little differently. I think the big difference is probably what you mentioned, like with auto-tune and so on. It's maybe you're not so much necessarily a music star as you're just sort of this performance piece of
You're a focal point.
Right. So, but I would say still, even today's young stars or pop stars still have to work pretty hard to get where they're at for the most part.
Yeah, well, I define a rock star as somebody that really does it. I mean, that walks the walk. Somebody that plays their own instrument, writes their own songs, and belts them out. And I just have to. I'm an old-fashioned guy, I guess, but I go back to Janis Joplin, Grace Slick. These women were they were in a band.
Yeah.
And they did the work, and they the creative work too. Chrissy Hine is probably she'd be my poster girl for female rock star. Just give me these gals any day over the cookie cutter divas that we have right now, like Britney and Ryan, the Beyonces and all that. Anyway, that's just my take on it. But
It's a good take.
yeah, okay. Anyway, that's all we have for this week. Thanks for joining us on Entertainment Insider, and I hope you'll join us again next week.
Let's see it.